Hi, I'm Bea Bruske, President of the Canadian Labour Congress.
Let's start with the future of work. And it's just a general overview of where you think we're heading. Obviously, we're in or exiting, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, COVID. We've got increased digitization going on in the workplace, and there's a whole bunch of other features that have really changed workplace and work cultures, also expectations and skills. So, what do you think the future of work in Canada looks like? And what do workers and employers have to expect from the workplace nowadays?
Well, as we've been working our way through this pandemic, what's become really apparent to me is that the amount of technology that we're using in our various different workplaces has increased exponentially. And of course, that's been driven by the pandemic and by our need to pivot to address those particular issues. And so workers have had to significantly change how they work and where they work. We're seeing much more remote work, working from home or hybrid type of work. We're seeing workers in various different industries who've had to get used to different processes. And we as a society have had to adjust to how we do everything from buy our groceries to get our medications to get our medical appointments in, for example. And so that's only going to continue over the next number of years. And one of the things that strikes me is that we are going to have to ensure that we're not leaving workers behind by making sure that the skill set matches the needs that we have in our workplaces and in our communities. You're going to have a lifetime of learning ahead of you because as technology changes, as our needs change, workers also have to be continuously upgrading. And that means employers and educational institutions and unions have to work towards determining what that looks like for workplaces. They have to work together in terms of coming up with collaborative approaches to addressing the needs and making sure that we can fill those skills and offering opportunities for students to be able to work while still getting their educational upgrades that they're going to need to stay current in their particular field. But more importantly, ensuring that workers that are currently working there also have the ability to take that reskilling if they need to while still maintaining their employment. So it has to include all of those parties. And sometimes, quite frankly, it also requires government funds, especially as we're looking at things like just transition and how do we move certain sectors of our economy to a net zero economy, right? So it requires all of those participants to come together to take an assessment, but also to all have their voices heard around that table. Because, in isolation or just working within one particular structure without talking to the others doesn't really get the best outcomes.
Well, let's speak about the labor shortages that we're facing, and this is across the economy. In there's a war for talent in some of the biggest sectors in Canada, and obviously those that are shaping the future of our economy. So healthcare, tech, all kinds of other sectors. What's behind the labor shortage, and what do you think we have to focus on now to resolve it?
Well, we know that there are more baby boomers who are retiring than we have young workers coming in to take their space. And so that requires all of us to think about how do we attract more workers. So it's not enough that we just have a demographic problem. We also need to find employment strategies that support workers who are newcomers to Canada, for example, who are maybe living with a disability, who might be older workers who need reskilling, who might be, Indigenous youth that might be looking for jobs, right? So we need to open our perspective to making sure that we have avenues for full employment for everyone who is able to and wants to fully work. And so I think that a lot of times, those kinds of opportunities are lacking in terms of bringing folks along that, haven't necessarily had an opportunity for full employment. So that again requires government, employers, and unions to work together to come up with what does that solution look like? Can we tailor make it for this particular community, for this particular sector of the economy? And how do we speak with those folks? How do we make sure that their voices are being heard in terms of meeting their needs? So that's the first thing that I think we need to do in order to actually broaden out our employment opportunities. I think one of the things that we have to recognize, and we hear it all the time, is that employers are having a hard time recruiting and retaining staff. And so that begs the question of what type of jobs do we have available for the staff that you're looking to recruit? Is it precarious work? Is it gig work? Do we have defined hours? Do we have workers who can count on it's Monday to Friday from this time to this time, or is it all over the map where workers are having a hard time being challenged working that into their work life, their family life? But also, many workers are working more than one job. So we need to have things like predictive scheduling, especially for part-time workers. That's critically important. Things like, what kind of wages are you offering? What kind of benefits are you offering? What does the workplace safety and health look like at your particular workplace? Is there access to personal protective equipment? Is there access to training and advancement opportunities? So employers, if they wish to recruit and retain employees, have to look at the quality of jobs that they're offering and ensure that they meet the test of what employees are also looking for. Because we know that with an aging population, there are less new workers entering the workforce. So you need to be a little bit more competitive in terms of what you're hoping to attract. And I think most workers want to see a pathway to a job that is a family sustaining pathway, but also an opportunity to grow within that workplace. So lifelong learning, opportunities for skills building, for reskilling, and advancement within that place of employment is going to be critically important. The other reality is that we have an aging population. We know that 1 in 5 workers works in the care economy. The care economy, everything from doctors and nurses to healthcare aides to, professional technical healthcare workers to individuals who help students at schools, to people working with housing, long-term care, a whole gamut of individuals, right? So 1 in 5 workers in Canada right now works in the care economy. Many of those jobs are really, quite frankly, undervalued and underpaid. So we need to have significant investments in the care economy because as we age, we are going to need more of those folks doing those particular jobs. We know that when governments invest in things like long-term care and having public long-term care, it gives not just the worker more of an ability to actually spend quality time with that particular resident. It also means better outcomes for the individuals needing that care.
Let's expand on that in terms of specific industries and what can be done within them. From your perspective, are there other sectors in the Canadian economy that hold a lot of promise in terms of the creation of high quality jobs? And what kind of support and from who is needed to achieve that, to make that a reality?
Absolutely. What strikes me is that we know we have an increase in automation, right? And so we know that that means labor saving opportunities, but it also means that the workers who are maybe at the more entry level type of jobs, who maybe have limited skills, are going to need significant skills upgrading in order to keep pace with the type of technology that we're going to be using, whether it's in manufacturing or whether it's, other kind of tech jobs that we're looking at, especially as we're transitioning to a different model, moving away from fossil fuels. When we're looking at different ways of getting the energy needs met, that is going to require new jobs. And so we have pockets of communities where, we need to be able to pivot and to be able to have good sustainable jobs created in those communities. That means that unions, government, and those employers and the community folks need to be at the table to determine what that's going to be in the future. We're looking for just transition legislation to address exactly those issues over the coming months, right? To bring all parties together to actually address what is going to be needed. So that's going to require some investments. It's going to require all hands on deck in terms of identifying the community needs, the training needs, and what the long-term projections might be for those particular workers and their communities. We also see that much more artificial intelligence is coming into play when we look at workforce issues. And so again, that requires us to rethink how we're doing our work. And are we making sure that workers aren't being left behind in our move to automate and to use artificial intelligence in every aspect of our lives?
You've mentioned just transition legislation 2 or 3 times already. Can we unpack that a bit more, if you don't mind? What are the policies or the programs or the initiatives that you're pushing for in that respect? And what impact do you think those will have on our future economy?
So we know that our government is looking at a net zero kind of transition by 2030 for many of the sectors that we are in. And so, when you have workers working in a coal-fired power plant, that's going to mean a significant shift from the way they're doing their work currently. And so what we're looking for from the labor movement is commitments to having workers at the table to discuss what their future is going to look like. That means, how do we actually make sure those communities have good investments to create new jobs? What do those new jobs have to look like? And that takes an all hands on deck approach. That can't just be, the employer and the government talking. It needs to have actually community input and worker input. How is retraining going to be developed? Is that retraining going to happen while those workers are transitioning out of those jobs, or will it happen after those jobs are gone? I would argue the first would be the better way to go, right? We want to make sure there isn't a break in earnings, right, for workers. So, all of those components is critically important. And then the minutiae of how you actually get there is critically important, right? What comes first? Is it the announcement of a plant shutting down that comes first, or is it the actual plan in terms of how we're pivoting that needs to come first? And I would argue that, there's a lot of fear and anxiety surrounding these kinds of changes. And the sooner that we can have these conversations and come up with robust strategies, the better. That requires the provinces to be on board, the federal government to be on board, and like I said, the employers and unions to be on board.